We had like a month of training before that. We had a boot camp. And for a month, we were only doing that. We were learning how to use the weapons, how to
Nice.
in synchron, how to listen to different gestures by without speaking, because a lot of times we don't really speak, we just understand each other with eyes and gestures.
Yeah, so I'm Chris from JoBlo. It's a pleasure to meet you. I really loved you in The Apprentice recently, actually. I thought that was a really good movie, really underrated.
Thank you so much. It really, really means the world to me talking about this movie. I feel not a lot of people, I don't know, open up a conversation about it. And I do feel like I'm not biased, but I feel like we have done some decent work on the movie. Ali is exceptionally talented. The boys, Sebastian and Jeremy, have poured their soul in building these layered, if I dare to say that, characters. And thank you. It means a lot. It means really a lot to see
But
that.
it was really cool seeing you though in such a change of pace role in this one in Dirty Angels. Like I've seen you, it's funny, I was trying to think about it. I've seen you in so many different types of roles recently. I've seen you do, you were great in Borat too. You were hilarious in that. You were great in Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. You were great as Ivanka Trump. But then, now seeing you in an action movie, that was kind of a new thing. And I thought you were great. And I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about, is it your first time doing an action film?
It's absolutely the first time. I hope it's not my last time, and it's not. Because I quickly that did a movie called Mayday, which also has some action elements. It's a Skydance Apple movie with Kenneth Branagh and Ryan Reynolds.
Oh,
But Dirty
nice.
was my first action movie, and I fell in love with the genre, to be honest. I never got a chance to learn more about it before. I was completely influenced by Scandinavian cinema, Danish cinema, heavy, emotionally devastating movies, psychological dramas. And then I went into the other opposite direction with Borat, had a big flirt with comedy, then went back to dramatic things and did Dirty Angels, fell in love with action as well. I think it's important. I think it's honestly important for you as an actor to remain this idea of longevity, to do different things. But I feel like it's also great to do that for your audience and for people that have enjoyed your previous work, to give them something that they don't expect, because it feels like a gift. If I want to see more of some of my favorite actors or some of my favorite directors, I would love to see something that I don't expect. So I think it's also beneficial for the people that have enjoyed your work before, to give them something different.
I imagine it must have been though physically the hardest role that you've ever done, right?
Yeah. I think so. I think it's been, but it's also very addictive to do it. It's very
Sure.
addictive to get into training and then to continue going. I remember uh, back in the day when we were shooting Dirty Angels, it was a very demanding shoot because a lot of it was during the night, a lot of it was during the winter, so it was cold and it was dark. And it's an ensemble movie, so it's always a little bit extra difficult to do it all together. It's incredible because you have partners in the scene, but it's also a little bit challenging to always match the same energy on set when there's more than two people. Um, but it's also so great to just have the idea of working out every single day, because we did. All of us did that. We were all living in the same area, in the same hotels. We had like a month of training before that. We had a boot camp. And for a month, we were only doing that. We were learning how to use the weapons, how
Oh,
to
nice.
in synchron, how to listen to different gestures by without speaking, because a lot of times we don't really speak, we just understand each other with eyes and gestures. So it's been challenging, but it's been really, really addictive and adrenalizing.
What was it like working with Martin Campbell? Because, he has a reputation for making amazing action stars. I mean, he made Pierce Brosnan, James Bond, and he made Daniel Craig, who had never done action before, one of the biggest action stars of all time. What was that like?
I mean, it was incredible. It's like a dream when you look at them, when you look at the history of James Bond, when you watch all of the movies, and I personally have seen all of them, if I dare to say.
As have
Uh,
I.
and my personal favorite James Bond movie is Casino Royale.
Oh, nice.
And it's again with Eva and Martin. And he is incredible leader. He knows how to do it with such a finesse, with such a elegance. So it's always beautiful to watch. It's believable because it's not like,
Cartoonish, not at all.
no, it's real, but it's so cinematically satisfying to watch it. And then when he adds all of the music, all of the effects, all of the stuff, it's just incredible. So I was humbled and honored to do my first action movie with him. I think there's never a better place to start it, or a better person to start it.
Well, last question I have to ask you is I've seen a lot of movies that are done like this that are kind of men on a mission movies. Like it's a pretty classic genre, but I haven't seen a women on a mission movie. And what was it like working in that big ensemble with so many kind of powerful actresses around you? Because I mean, everybody, Eva Green, Ruby Rose, like these are all like pretty legendary people to a certain extent.
And also Rona, I mean, I remember around the pandemic when we all discovered the power of Netflix, or at least for me, that was the time when I was like, okay, so streaming is the future in a way. There was this show called Fauda, and Rona
Oh
was
yeah.
one of the main characters, and she was exceptional. She was so well trained and so open to discuss and to build chemistry between the characters. It's been incredible. It's wonderful to work with people that are open-minded and collaborative because at the end of the day, you're just as good as your partner. You cannot do it on yourself. It takes a village to build something and to create chemistry on screen, and you should be having a good partner. And all these ladies have been exceptionally open and dedicated to the craft. And Martin has created the story about powerful, badass, beautiful but talented women soldiers. And it's all inspired by this book called Ashley's War. And
Sure.
it's about untold stories about female soldiers at war and all of the difficulties that they face, and the fact that sometimes they're even stronger than men. A lot of times they're stronger than men, and it's just a matter of representation to talk about that, to talk about the fact that women are just as equally strong as their opposite gender. And we have this in the movie, I believe.
Well, thank you very much. I really enjoyed the movie and it was great talking to you. Thank you very much.
So much. Thank you.
So call it. We shoot our way out. We have 12 hours to find the girls.
Well, have we talked before, Chris?
We have, yes, yes,
We
talked.
certainly have. I recognize you. Yes, mate. Yeah.
Yeah, we talked a few times for JoBlo. I'm a huge fan of yours, and I'm a big fan of all of your movies, going all the way back to No Escape, actually. Stuart
Oh
Wilson
my God!
movie.
Isn't it funny you should mention that? We'll give you an extra couple of minutes, by the way, if there's. But I was trying to dig out where No Escape. I couldn't get a copy of it, and
Just
finally,
got really,
I finally managed to dig it up in some streamer. I don't know where the hell it was, but it was quite interesting because that's a film I haven't seen for years and years, and finally managed to dig it up in I forget what streamer it was, but I thought it had sort of escaped the streamers and had disappeared into a void somewhere.
what Stuart Wilson in that gives one of my favorite villain performances of all time.
Yes, it's
But
very-
he was the best in that movie.
Well, actually, what's very interesting about Stuart Wilson is that I had him in 3 movies, and he died by a different height every time. So, in other words, he got hurled off off that top of the tower in No Escape, right? In
Yeah.
Zorro, he dropped off where the gold all dropped on top of him, and on Vertical Limit, he falls off the mountain.
I really love Vertical Limit as well. I remember seeing that in theaters when it opened on opening day. And I remember that first scene when they're falling down the mountain
On the falling down the mountain.
and he gets killed. I climb rocks sometimes too.
Oh,
I
you do?
a
Okay.
little bit, but I always remember that movie though. Whenever I'm doing that though, where those guys come down screaming and then they take on
Oh, yeah. Well,
Wilson,
actually,
it always comes
those
back to
wide
me.
shots were all shot in Monument Valley, and they were 700 feet up on that thing. Not the actors, obviously, but their doubles on the wide shots, were all 700 feet up on one of those huge sort of Monument Valley. They call them mesas. I forget what they call them.
Yeah.
But
Well, it's the kind of the verisimilitude of that. And I think that, that's one of the reasons I really liked Dirty Angels, actually getting back to that, because I find nowadays when you watch movies, when you watch like big action movies or anything that has action in it, it's very phony looking. And I found that there's that realism in Dirty Angels. And I was just wondering, because it's such an explosive topic too, if you could just talk a little bit about what drew you to it, because I know that you also were one of the writers on it too, weren't you?
well, I wasn't the right. I kind of worked the story and so forth. But I'm a great fan of mission movies, right?
Yeah, me too.
And I go back to, and the best mission movies were not made in the last 20 years. The best ones were made in the 60s and 70s.
Dirty Dozen, Where Eagles Dare.
Guns of Navarone and Kelly's Heroes. And
Amazing,
those to me were the great movies, right? And I'd always wanted to do a mission movie. But, so this came up. And what was interesting about it, it was all women. And somehow the women, what's the word? It had to be women, because to go into Afghanistan, obviously they're treated like, fifth-class citizens. They can wear their hijabs. They're the perfect kind of team to go in. If they were male soldiers, then of course they would never succeed. And so it's absolutely justified that it should be women, as opposed to, let's make a movie with 6 women, right? Let's sort of change the dynamic. But I think it's totally justified that it's women, and so that was important. And on top of that, it's an ensemble movie. You know what I mean? I've never done one before, and I certainly went into it with some trepidation, thinking, "My God, I've got 6 women, 6 actresses here. This is, this is going to be." But they were wonderful. They all, not only were they excellent actresses, but they all got on famously.
I just spoke to Maria Bakalova, and she had high praise for you, and she said that she really loved being able to do her first action movie, and I have to say that's a thing that I've always been a fan of, though, when you do against type casting, because it would have been dull, I think, if I had seen like somebody who I was really used to watching in action movies, especially in a part like hers. It's fun when it's somebody that you haven't seen do that kind of thing before. It kind of adds almost to the realism in some ways. And you have a great reputation having done that. I mean, you made Daniel Craig into James Bond, Ray Liotta into an action star, and
yes, right.
Do you talk a little bit about her particularly in the role? I thought she was great, and Eva Green. I mean, amazing.
Well, that's a very different for her. I mean, obviously, I'd used her Casino Royale,
sure,
and she worked very hard in this. Obviously, I always assumed she did it because she wanted to do something different, but perhaps she wanted to break the image of these sort of, the always getting these wonderfully sort of glamorous parts and so forth. She's so beautiful, and she worked very hard. She trained very hard and so forth. Took it very seriously, as did all the girls. And but again, it was ensemble. They all had a fair crack of the whip. I mean, you know what I mean? It wasn't sort of, even though she's the lead in the movie, you kind of remember it as the team rather, than necessarily sort of Eva being the lead, and, it kind of, you think of them as the team rather than just the individual actor. So, which I think was the right way to go.
Well, I mean, there have been a few kind of women on mission movies made, but they're kind of like, they tend to always be these heightened kind of fantasies, with like a threat that doesn't seem very, very realistic, where in this one, it's ripped from the heavens.
Well, they also achieve ridiculous kind of physical, they're attacked by 10 kind of black suited kind of commandos and they kick the shit out of them. Well, that's rubbish. I mean,
Yeah.
it's utter rubbish. And it's one of the things I tried to steer clear on this is that all the action they can do.
Sure.
I think it's achievable. There are no heroics in the terms of the action. They're military, they're trained, and there's nothing that is heightened action that you think, this is bullshit. I mean, there's no way they could do this. They could do any of that stuff.
As an action fan, and I'm a really big action fan, one of the things that drives me crazy about action movies these days is that a lot of the leading men that we have, particularly The Rock and Jason Statham, they won't take hits in movies, and that drives me crazy because it's for some reason it seems like they're threatened by that, or they view it as unheroic. But I think it's way more heroic when they do get the shit kicked out of them, like you said.
I agree with you. You're absolutely right. I mean, it's so
Even
weird.
Jackie Chan in The Foreigner, like he gets the shit kicked out of him in that movie, and he's better.
Yes, he does. And you're absolutely right. I mean, you don't see the Statham and the Rock. You see all this stuff. I switch off on those movies now. I just switch off. I just don't believe them. And the Fast and the Furious are so ridiculous now. I sort of see these huge action scenes which are completely impossible in real life. I switch off. It's boring. I find it boring.
Yeah. Well, and also, I mean, the thing that I liked about Dirty Angels, though, is that it's a real world setting. I mean, I know it's not based on a true story necessarily, but I do feel like in some ways something like that could happen, though, especially considering the situation.
Absolutely it could happen. And and also we've got a very good villain too. I think he's ex-George is rather wonderful.
You always have good villains in your movies.
It's always that thing of charm and evil. You know what I mean? The more charming they are, the more evil they are, basically. And so we had a good villain and so forth. And no, I thoroughly enjoyed making it. It was a tough one, but it was very enjoyable.
I gotta ask you one more question. I really liked both Edge of Darkness the movie, but Edge of Darkness the TV serial even more with Joe Don Baker. And I just wanted to know, would you ever consider doing like another limited series like that, considering how far the craft?
Absolutely would. Yeah, the point about the movie, to be honest, the movie could never achieve what the TV series did.
Sure. I thought it was good though. I liked it.
Yeah, I did 120. Well, what was the great thing about the series, and I credit the writer with this, was all the political chicanery that went on in that series, right? Yeah. Also, Joe Don's terrific, and the contrast with, the dour Yorkshire Bob Peck. Right? The contract was that contrast was. Was really interesting. The movie, unfortunately, with the real estate you've got in terms of time and so forth, for the running time of the movie, it's really a kind of revenge story, isn't it? It's kind of, sadly, you can't do any of what the series did, which was all the political, the labyrinthine political kind of intrigue that went on in that movie. All the Thatcher. It also had something to say about the manufacture of illegal plutonium, and none of that could go into the movie because there's just no time. You couldn't develop it into any of that stuff.
With what's happening politically, I feel like this would be a really interesting time to redo that as a limited series.
Yeah, absolutely. But you would have, as a series, it works much better as a series than a movie. That's the point. And you're probably right. You could remake it with the political canvas as it is at the moment. You could adapt that into, no doubt you could adapt that into by redoing that series.
Well, thank you very much for your time. I really loved talking to you, and I really enjoyed the movie. I'm looking forward to more people seeing it. I always like your work, though. It's always, and your action movies are top notch. So thank you very much for your time.
Thanks, man. Really appreciate it, mate. Thanks a lot.
Bye.